Well, good morning. I want to welcome everybody to the webinar. A couple quick housekeeping items. Have everybody muted, just cuts down on background noise. Also wanted to mention there's a couple different ways to engage with questions during the webinar. You can do it either through Twitter if you use the hashtag SHSwebinars, or in the GoToMeeting dialog box. You will notice that there's a place that you can post questions. And then I'll answer those once we wrap up here in a little bit. I'd also encourage you, if you're not already doing it, if you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow us at Mike McCarty SHS. Put a lot of information out. I wouldn't say a lot. We put out 2 or 3 tweets a day. You know, not enough to overwhelm you, but enough that if we see something important, or if we've got you know, a tip that we want to, you know, make sure our clients get, that we put out, you know, small tidbits of information throughout the day. So focus today is really looking at, you know, reference checks and traditional reference checks and phone-based reference checks. I'm Mike McCarty, founder and CEO of Safe Hiring Solutions, also founder of RefLynk, Safe Visitor and Safe Recruiter. Safe Hiring has been in business now for about 13 years. We developed RefLynk about 3 years ago now, and so really the idea behind RefLynk is that, you know, starting to see a lot of organizations that were moving away from reference checks, and primarily the reason that they were abandoning reference checks is it was taking way too long, getting way too little information. So it was very costly and time consuming, and was generating very little competency data. So there really wasn't anything in the data that was actionable. And you come up against a lot of corporate business-to-business policies that restrict information to name, rank, and serial number. And so the problem is there's a lot of information on a candidate, either a volunteer or an employee, that could only be gathered through a reference check. So for an example, if you're an organization that works with employees and volunteers, you know, one of the biggest issues that volunteer organizations deal with is doing criminal background checks. But if you're working with kids and you're trying to keep sex offenders out of your organization, 80% of sex offenders do not have a criminal history. So a criminal background check is only going to flush out that 20% that's already had a criminal conviction. So how do we get feedback on that other 80%? Same thing we've noticed in other verticals is we supply a criminal background check that comes back fine. There's nothing adverse in the criminal background check, but we've got clients that have been using RefLynk for a while, and within that, they're starting to generate a lot of competency-based negative information where they're actually denying positions now based on the reference check because of the feedback that they're getting through a system like RefLynk. And so what RefLynk does to disrupt the phone reference checks is, first of all, it kind of bypasses that business-to-business model, and it's a candidate-driven system. So what that means is everything's coming from your candidate, not from you as the organization. We're just about done integrating it within the Safe Hiring background screening process, so it will be able to be ordered and bundled within the same method you're using today for ordering criminal background checks. But how that works is your candidate is today, so without the integration, you log into RefLynk, and I'm going to show you how you do this. You know, once we set everything up, candidate receives a text in an email. They click on a link, they enter their references, they save it, sends a text and an email to their references, comes from them asking them to provide feedback, and so it gets around those business-to-business policies. Matter of fact, we rarely see references that decline feedback, and typically when they're declining feedback, it's not because of a policy. They're declining feedback because they're saying things like, well, I didn't really know them that well, or, you know, something like that. And so this really helps to get around that. The reference feedback is confidential. So now the references understand as I'm providing feedback, it's not going to say on the report, Mike McCarty said X, Y, and Z. It's actually going to aggregate it based on the relationship and score it. And so now I've got a level of anonymity so that I can provide feedback without it being, specifically tagged to me. We're also looking at adding some functionality where a reference providing feedback would also, at the end of that feedback, get maybe a pop-up that asks them if there's anybody else they think should provide feedback on this particular candidate. And so another way of getting more feedback and even more objective feedback, because now it's not even a reference that was submitted by the actual candidate. These can be, on the employment side, completely competency-based. Most of our, corporate clients will have, 3 to 4 competencies, anywhere from 4 to 5 questions per competency. And so now you're getting really, skill-based, competency-based information. You can have as many positions with as many questions, as many references as you want. And there's, no charge. It's either a per candidate fee, or we can aggregate it as a software as a service where you pay monthly or annually based on your volume. But within that, you could include 5 or 6 references, and we have many clients that do that. It's totally automated. So now if you're, doing reference checks and nobody's answering, you're leaving voicemails, you're calling them back and they're still not providing information, or you're getting somebody and you're interrupting them. And so that's what I say. A lot of times traditional reference checks it's an interrupted model, and my days are pretty crazy. And so if somebody were to actually catch me, more than likely they're going to leave me a voicemail, and it's going to take me a little bit of time to get back to it. But I got one the other day. RefLynk, boom, I could provide the feedback on my phone, on a break, in a meeting, wherever I'm at, and they got the information that potentially could have taken them days to maybe get from me if they were using a telephone. And if they interrupt me, depending on my thinking, you may not get as much information, or you may think you heard something in my voice, or you interpret something that may or may not be necessarily true. I've heard others say, I really like to get people on the phone. I can tell things about their voice inflection. Well, unless you can tell that I'm distracted, sometimes I may be doing a couple different things and I'm talking to you, but I'm also working on something else, and that may be more important than actually giving some feedback. And so this is an uninterrupted method of being able to provide feedback on a candidate. When we say totally automated, once that candidate is entered into the system, you're done. The system takes over. It reminds your candidate every 12 hours or twice a day until they enter their references. And then the references get a reminder each day until they provide feedback. Or if they opt out and decline feedback, it'll pop up, ask them for a reason. They don't have to provide one, but it also sends a message to your candidate so they can add another reference. So it automates that whole piece, so you're not tracking them down each day, seeing who's provided information, who hasn't. It's all kind of automated. You get a daily, what I call coffee digest or update or reminder. And so you can see what's going on in the system, where the statuses are, what the feedback looks like, and where your candidates are at. The results come back in graphs. So we try to convert everybody to a Likert scale model. We have some huge organizations that we've converted the majority of their process to a Likert model, but at the same time they might have a few open-ended questions that they want to ask that get tagged on to the end of the report. The idea behind the Likert model is it's a bit more objective, and it allows you to digest a lot more information a lot more quickly. For example, we got a volunteer organization. They had about 10,000 volunteers. They do 3 reference checks, phone-based, per volunteer, so that's roughly 30,000 reference checks. We've converted them over to RefLynk and totally automated that whole process for them. And theirs is pretty interesting because they have a position, which is volunteer, that's standard across all of their volunteers, but they have a set of questions they ask. They have to have one current supervisor. They have a set of questions. They have a peer who has a different set of questions, and then they have a self-evaluation, which is a third set of questions. So within that one position, we can actually attach 3 different surveys, or a survey for each reference type, and so then it can pull that information back in. So let's move over here and take a look at high-end how RefLynk works. So what we're looking at here on RefLynk, this is basically the dashboard. It's showing, we're looking at completed reports. You've got you know, across the top here, you can toggle between new, in progress, don't have any in progress at the moment on the demo site, and then completed. You'll notice if we had anything in progress, if you hover over this new candidate, it's also, when it moves to in progress, it's going to give you a snapshot as well. You know, how many references and what type of references have responded, so you can quickly get a feel for, you know, where everybody's at in the process. You know, as I mentioned before, once we set you up in the system, we can, you know, create as many, you know, positions as you need if the survey that you use is different, or if you just want to separate them out. And so the sum total of kind of what you're doing today is you log in here, you click add a candidate. Whoops, I had timed out because I talked too much on the demo. Let me log back in. And so once you click on add a candidate, you're going to add the name, the email, their mobile phone. You're going to click a box that says you have the authorization to send them a text message. If you have more than one position, you know, select the position. As soon as you select the position, it knows how many references, what type of reference, the surveys, everything is included. All you have to do is click save, and the system does everything from this point forward. Once it's integrated within the Safe Hiring background screening platform, then candidates that are literally entering their information through the online system will go ahead and enter all their reference information and contact information at that point, so when they save out, it will send it off. Once that information is complete, so you get a completed report, there's 2 different methods of looking at reports. You've got a PDF version, so you could, you know, if you download and you keep a copy of these, and you know, internally you can download the PDF. The easiest way to really review the information is looking at the HTML report online. And when I click on a candidate, it's going to show me, the first thing I see is an overall results for this candidate. So in this particular candidate, they had 1 former supervisor, 1 peer, and 1 self-evaluation. So very quickly I can look at this and see that, first, I now know that everything 4.0 and above is green. Everything below 4 down to 3 is a mustard color. Everything below 3 that goes into negative is actually going to be red. So we even color coded, so I can quickly see, you know, this candidate is in the 4.0 and above category. I don't want to stop here because there could be negative information that I would miss. So if I hit show categories, so the categories, think in terms of categories are also could be your competencies. And so in this particular one, we've got adaptability, decision-making, performance management, leadership. There's several down through here. So for adaptability, I can see that the overall for adaptability actually dropped down into, you know, the yellow or below 4.0 for an overall score. Same thing for performance management. Now I can go over here and hit, you know, show me each of the questions underneath. So under adaptability, I can look at the 5 questions. And one of the things I'm going to see really quickly is the one that dropped below 3 that's down into negative territory. The really nice thing about RefLynk is twofold. One, it could be negative information that could cause you not to use them as a volunteer or not to hire them. It could also be negative information that you could take and say, okay, I know coming into the organization here is a very specific area that we need to coach on. So it's maybe just a deficiency that needs some coaching. And so that helps. The other piece of RefLynk, being an automated process that I think is very unique is that we recommend, especially on the employment side, that you're using RefLynk earlier in the process. And so now maybe I've got a position narrowed down to 2 or 3 candidates. I could actually initiate the reference check or RefLynk at that point and maybe let that narrow the field for me. So we've got some clients that are actually using RefLynk a little earlier in the process. So that is really RefLynk. The sum total, or the most amount of work that goes into RefLynk, is really on initial setup, where we define positions and reference requirements and modify any of the surveys if you want to modify any of the default surveys and have questions added to that. So I'm going to pause here, see if we have any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I just want to thank everybody for attending today. If you think of something after we wrap up, feel free to reach out to us, send us an email, give us a call. Be happy to answer that. If you want more information or pricing on RefLynk, be happy to provide that as well. Otherwise, have a great day.